Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Robert with another episode, another interview from Islam for Europeans. And my honor guest today, coming from Calgary, Canada, my fellow Canadian, Ahsan Irfan. Welcome to the show, Ahsan.
Assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum. Good to be here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
And Jazakallah for having me too.
Yeah,
I love opportunities to talk.
No, absolutely. And I'm so glad, I'm trying to get input from Muslims from all walks of life. And you yourself, you lived in the West your entire life, but your family is originally from Pakistan. Is that correct?
I've lived in the West since my university days. So I started university in Hamilton, Ontario. I've lived in Dubai actually before that, but I was born in Pakistan, and my ancestry is from that region.
Okay. And how was the transition like going from like Pakistan to Dubai to then Canada? Like what was, how
Well, the transition from Pakistan to Dubai was non-existent because my the only reason I was born in Pakistan was because my mom was visiting at the time.
Okay.
Right. So I would have been born in Dubai otherwise. So thoroughly a Dubai kid. Grew up there. All my friends are still from my best friend till this day is actually a guy from Dubai. He's in the States now, but it just goes to show how much impact a childhood has on the rest of your life, right? That but coming to Canada was I'd say it was a bit of a culture shock the first year. After that, you just get used to things, and you've got a degree to complete, so you're not going to really worry about too many other things, right? So that's I have no other country to compare it to, but I found it very, very welcoming. There's no doubt about that. The Canadian reputation for politeness, it's well deserved.
I know. Well, that's great. Thank you for that. No, I mean we're known for, we want to be as different from the Americans as possible. No, I'm just kidding. My mom's American, so I don't want to get too much trouble. No. But that's great. That's awesome. And the Muslim experience in Canada, once you were in university and then moved to Calgary, I mean, what has that been like compared to Islam in Dubai in general?
I think the biggest thing is that and this goes back to the idea of culture and how culture, Friedrich Hayek, the economist who won the Nobel Prize in the 70s, he said something like a culture is a repository for generational data or generational information. So information that's going to be carried from generation to generation, right? And places like Pakistan and Dubai and the Muslim world in general, they've been Muslim for so long. The attitudes, the behaviors, the habits that you need to be successful as a Muslim, they've been passed down. Of course, it's degenerated. Nobody's going to argue that. I'm not going to argue that it's not degenerated, but those habits and behaviors and ideas and attitudes have been passed down from generation to generation. So it's a lot easier to be a Muslim in the Muslim world than it is to be here. There's no question about it, right? I often use this example. A lot of people use this example that the very fact that you can hear the adhan in Dubai and elsewhere, and here you cannot, makes a very big difference. And it's not like they're not. I lived in Dubai. There are plenty of non-Muslims there. So dealing with non-Muslims is not the problem. It's the whole idea of there being a culture where your attitudes are set and you're expected from you because everybody, it's a social conformity is the way you want to put it, right? Now coming over here, however, you've now completely disconnected yourself from that, right? So it becomes an order of magnitude more hard to stick to your ideals, stick to the behaviors and practices of the deen as opposed to back there, right? So for me personally, the MSA was a very big help. It functioned as more or less a cultural club, but the fact that all of the people there were Muslims, they were as invested in their 5-time prayers as other Muslims are. So that kind of thing certainly helps, right? So if there had been no MSA, I would say it would have been a lot weaker as a Muslim than what I am. No, don't want to toot my own horn here, but the MSA plays a very, very crucial role, very instrumental role for students who come over, and that's they because they carry the same behaviors, habits, attitudes from the Muslim world. It's easy, and they create a culture of their own. And MSA looked at under a microscope, you'd see that they behave similar to the culture of an entire country. They're just a subculture within the culture of Canada or the United States or whatever. But because they have that, they have social expectations, they have habits that other people follow, so it's a lot easier for you to engage in those habits and behaviors that are expected of you because of the idea of social conformity. Everybody else is doing it, so therefore should I.
Yeah.
Now, if organizations aren't there, MSA like organizations aren't there, then I would imagine that things would be a lot harder for Muslims. It certainly would have been a lot harder for me to maintain my deen had it not been for organizations like the MSA. Right now, coming to Calgary, and that's just as a student life perspective. But one thing that when you get out into the workforce, you become a part of society, a productive member of society after you've finished your education. I don't know what it would be like if I was the sole Muslim at my own company. I don't know how that would function. Like, will I lose my deen in that scenario? I don't know. I just haven't faced it. So again, the idea that wherever I've gone to work, whatever company I've chosen to work for, has had a Muslim presence, where when it's Ramadan, you sit down in the lunchroom and break your fast at the end of the day. There were certain times, like when I used to work for a company in Mississauga, there were certain times where I had to stay late with others, and the time for iftar would come in then, right? And so you have other Muslims to break the fast with, mashallah, alhamdulillah. I don't know what that experience would be like if there were no Muslims, right? And you're just going to break your fast alone in the lunchroom. I don't know what that experience is going to be like, right?
Yeah, I remember delivering pizzas, and I was the only one fasting during Ramadan. And sometimes I'd have to break my fast on the road. Like I would, look at the clock in my car, and I was delivering a pizza out to the county, and 8 14-year-olds around. I was like, well, while I'm driving. So that does, it's not easy. And my whole town was not Muslim either. I mean, very few of them lived there. So it was, I had to drive to Windsor, which is a half-hour drive, to go to the mosque and, get my Islamic experience there, get frozen like an ice cube, and then, spend a couple hours there and then drive all the way back. So
right. Well,
it's a challenge. But no, it's, I don't know what it's like to, live in a Muslim country for so long, where Islam is such a huge presence. And then you're going to, the West, where, you don't hear the adhan anymore. No one's addressed Islamically, and very few people are addressed Islamically. It's got to be a challenge in and of itself. I will say though, that when I was in university, the MSA was, I felt like I had more in common with the kids at the MSA than like the uncles at your run of the mill mosque.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
I can't relate to any of the uncles.
And I think part of that is because they were going through the same experience of being away from their family, and even though their family's Muslim, it's still this feeling that you're kind of alone. So being in a mosque in an MSA, will give you, you feel like you have this something you can relate to with them.
Yeah,
that, like,
definitely,
that you're all in this together. Like you're like, on a boat in the sea and you see like another boat with other people, and it's just it does help a lot, I think. Yeah. But I wanted to skip ahead to something more related to culture as well. You sent out a tweet a while back about marriage and why so many marriages are falling apart in the Muslim, in I guess Muslims living in the West and abroad as well. And then I got a lot of feedback, and you actually did it an interview with Noor from Fig and Olive. Do you want to just touch up on that, or just give a brief description of what the tweet was about and the reaction to that, Ahsan?
Oh man, that's a can of worms. It was actually a full thread. I can't remember how many tweets I had in the thread, but there were basically 12 points that was talking about. Some were like, really run of the mill, keeping yourself in shape and stuff like that, or things become different when you have kids or whatever. But like, I think the part that touched a nerve was the idea that you have to have boundaries with your spouse. But I mean, I was writing it from the point of view of a husband, but that equally applies to the wife as well, towards her husband, right? So husband to, whether the relationship is husband to wife or whether it's wife to husband, you got to have boundaries, and boundary violations have to have consequences, and keeping within boundaries has to have positive consequences, the whole reward punishment routine. If you're gonna, the idea is that you should never be a goody two shoes. You should never let anyone, doesn't matter who they are, wife, kids, parents, run over you. Don't let anybody run over you, because if you do that, they lose respect for you, and then you lose respect for yourself, and then that has you can't function, right? If your mind is not in the right place, then how are you going to function in society? And the same thing applies to marriage, where you ought to have boundaries that you should expect your spouse to adhere to. And that doesn't mean that, a lot of people were like, well, this is abusive. Like, how is boundary keeping abuse? Like, I don't understand how. I mean, I'm not beating my wife. Like where's the abuse here, right? Like, I'm not doing, like, some said it was like manipulative. I'm like, but like, I'm not. It'll become manipulative if I say something like, if I threaten my wife, so if you don't get me my cup of tea by 5 p.m., I'm going to divorce you. I'm not doing that. Like, you gotta have a certain amount of reasonableness, right? Nobody's saying that you start taking a hammer and start whacking people on their heads with it, right? You have to be reasonable about what you're doing. But the idea that you ought to have boundaries in all your relationships. Think about a friend who betrays your trust. Are you going to be friends with them, like, even after? But no, you're not, right? That's a fairly it's a great example. There's other smaller stuff too, right? Like, and now consequences doesn't mean that you'll start people, divorce your wife just because she doesn't get you tea at 5 p.m. It means more like, okay, look, the example I gave Noor was, look, the beginning of my when we first got married, my wife was very much adamant that I get a home on a mortgage, a non-Sharia compliant mortgage. I just said, look, I'm the one who's going to have to answer to Allah on the day of judgment about this. If you're going to continue nagging me about this, I'm going to come late home from work. I don't want to hear this, right? Give them like 2-3 days. You just, okay, fine, whatever. That's what I'm talking about. A lot of people just took that. They want to assume the worst of you, right? It is like, why would you want to do it? Well, I mean, it's like you're living in their heads rent free if they're going to do that. They're just assuming the worst of you for, I don't know, they've got something in their heads that's making them do that. So that was the thrust of it, right? Like, the first 3 or 4 points were about that. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was so long, 6, 7, 8 months ago, whatever. But that was the thrust of it, and that got me fair bit of negative publicity. But then I also got an interview with Sister Noor, which was a very good interview. Mashallah, she's a good interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at the end of our chat, you could put the link to that interview too, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll send you the link to that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing that old school idea. It's not like this is something my dad would have said. Yeah, if your mom had been getting out of line, I'd have given her some consequences to deal with too. It's not. I mean, this is like basic relationship management. So this, which is why before we started the show, I was telling you about how even 20, 30 years ago, a generation ago, this would not have been looked upon as something egregious. Just because we're living in a woke, liberalized culture right now, everybody thinks that, putting boundaries on your behavior is kind of somehow abusive or manipulative.
Yeah, I mean, I put some posts. I put out a video of another interviewer interviewing people from Palestine, and the question was, would you marry someone from Gaza or Hebron? And almost all the other Palestinians from the city said no. The cultures are too different,
very different.
And and I quote it. I'm just like, look, if this if the differences between two different cities in the same Muslim region, if they don't feel that they're compatible for one another, then why would we think that marrying two people from completely different backgrounds is going to work out all the time? And I'm not saying that it can't work out. What I'm saying is that, especially for us converts, we have no Muslim family to screen for potential spouses. Many a times these sisters don't ask for anything for a mahar. They know almost nobody in the community. So it's almost like there's no checks and balances. And these are very, these are very important things. And I don't understand. I mean, to get such negative feedback, especially from, fresh new converts who are like, no, it should be okay. Islam should be the only thing that matters. And, and I don't think they really understand, the differences in not just culture, but just, geographic situations, life situations. And if these things are not discussed, because we can't date, how are we going to discuss them before, we enter into this life-changing affair? And this comes from this whole, and this is a very illiberal idea, and it touches a nerve with people. Would you agree with me, Ahsan? That
I absolutely 100% agree with that. I always found the argument that, oh, a marriage should just be based on the principles of the deen. I found that argument very disingenuous to begin with. And the reason I've always found it disingenuous is because the particular behaviors and habits of the deen, assuming you are a practicing Muslim, when you bring that to a marriage, they're going to be exactly the same, more or less, right? If you're other than, say, the inter-school differences of prayer or something like that, which don't really make much of a difference to married life, right? That stuff is not going to be a make or break thing. What's going to make or break is the other stuff, the halal stuff, not the wajib, not the fard, not the sunnah. That stuff, if you're a reasonably practicing Muslim and both spouses are in that same boat, then that's not going to be a problem, right? Like I know, no, mashallah, this person's marriage is very solid, but a Pakistani gentleman married to a Palestinian, and whenever I knew him some time ago, but whenever I used to visit him, he's like, I miss biryani. I wish my wife would, make biryani. I wish my wife would wear shalwar qameez, something like that. I'm like, now this is a bit of an innocuous, really tiny example, but it's unbelievable how the habits that you bring to marriage, the behaviors that you bring to marriage from your previous life, they are going to have a direct bearing on the marriage itself, whether it's from the side of the wife, whether it's from the side of the husband, right? So it's not just the dini habits, the dini practices that are going to make or break a marriage. I mean, if again, this is also part of compatibility, where if somebody is like super like he's doing tahajjud and he's fasting three every other day, and he's doing all sorts of stuff, and the wife is like she's barely making her 5 times prayers, yeah, that's an issue of compatibility too. But assuming that that's taken care of, then other things like what kind of cooking she engages in, what are her or even from the point of view of the husband, what are their expectations with respect to child rearing, is television okay or not okay? If it's okay, how much of it is okay? Those are the kinds of questions that you're going to have to, I mean, if you imagine this as a battle between the spouses, that's what's going to happen, right? That you're going to find these issues that have nothing to do with the deen directly, right? That become battlegrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have to fight over those things. And so one of the reasons why, at least, I don't know about the Arabs, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing in the Arab culture as well, but among Pakistanis, this is especially my family is very big on this, right? That it's not even in my family that you marry somebody, you're expected to marry somebody from within the extended family. It's not just that. There's a whole vetting process. Like the potential mother-in-law visits the home of the bride to be, and she's looking very minutely at how the parents are behaving and how the girl is behaving, how the siblings are behaving. And that's the same kind of expectation when they come over to the potential groom's house as well, right? And then you're looking for markers of upbringing, how your upbringing has been thus far. Why they do that is because, again, it's not explicit, but implicitly they know that the habits that you build up during your childhood, you are going to be bringing those habits to the marriage as well, in large measure. Of course, nobody can actually predict the outcome of a marriage, but it's no accident that uh, marriages 20 plus years ago were a heck of a lot more stable than they are now. This is clearly reflected in the divorce rates, right? Like even in Pakistan now, the divorce rates are now like 30-40%, whereas like a generation ago, in the 90s, you barely heard of a divorce. Right? When a divorce happened, everybody would be like, oh my God, divorce. It's and of course that has its own unfortunate social consequences for the widow, or not the widow, sorry, for the divorcee woman. The man can get out scot-free even if he was in the wrong, but they had a lot of consequences for the women who were divorced. But let's keep that to the side though. But this thing was the reason why compatibility is looked into, and to the point that there's this thing among Pakistanis. I don't know how common it is now, but when I was younger, it was a very common thing. Somebody from Karachi would not want to get married from somebody in Punjab. Somebody in Punjab would not want to get married to somebody in Karachi. And at the time I was like, that sounds weird. But when you grow up and you see like, okay, these people live differently, so it's natural to expect them not to want to marry into your community. And we'd live differently. We don't want them to, want ours people to marry within them. It makes total sense, right? And then of course, when you start learning about fiqh and you see how ingrained the idea of compatibility and kafa'a is in the legal schools, you then say, like, it makes complete sense. How else do you expect a marriage to last in a healthy manner till either of the spouses dies, right? Not to mention, and that's just the health of the marriage and the longevity of the marriage itself, but also that the kids need a stable environment to grow up in, right? They need to have a predictability in their environment, based on which you can pass on the values and the ideas and the attitudes that you want them to have. I don't think that's limited just to the Muslims, right? 100 years ago, even in Europe and America, a dad would look after the interests of her daughter. A suitor comes along, and what are some of the things that they ask him? What kind of work he's involved in, how much money he's earning, whether he can afford a place for the wife or not. What family is he from? Family was big. Like even and among the Brits, even today, some of the elite Brits, the aristocracy, they're not going to just let you marry some
Like chav.
But see how much ruckus the marriage between Harry and Meghan Markle is causing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she may be fair in her criticism of the royal family as being racist or whatever, but at the end of the day, well, you wanted to marry into this family, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's you. I'm not touching that one, but no, point taken, Nasan. I mean, yeah, it's I don't think people realize, like, and like some Muslims are just going to an extreme, like, because we're following this pattern that's been around for several hundred years, that they think this is going to somehow cause disunity, or by shedding this idea, this is how we achieve unity and end racism in the Muslim community. And sometimes it just creates a feud between two different groups, and it just makes matters worse.
Yeah, is it better for society to have subcultures that they marry within, or is it better for marriages to blow apart? That, I mean, I think the latter is the worst option, right? You don't, and in any given situation, you don't want, because a marriage is not just a marriage between this is one of the biggest problems that people think about. They think of that marriage in terms of just being a relationship between a man and a woman, and unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a marriage between two families, right? It's a marriage between two, if you're coming with two different sets of ideas, it's a marriage between ideas. It's a marriage between, if you're coming from two different cultures, it's a marriage between cultures, right? And whatever you can do to grease the wheel, right, to make things run smoother, that should be on the table. Because what's at stake? What's at stake is not, I mean, of course, it's unfortunate that the husband and the wife may have to separate or divorce and deal with mental health issues after that. But what's really at stake is the generation that's going to come after. Do you want them to, have let's face it, kids who have parents divorced, they there's a lot of data on this, that it's not that they do a lot poorer in school or in life in general, in terms of income, but there is a difference between kids who grow up in healthy families versus kids who grow up in families who've divorced. I mean, to me, that's like an open and shut case why you would want your spouses to be compatible, right? Now, to address the idea of the charge of this being racism, it's quite a stretch to say that I hate a particular race if I'm not going to marry within them.
I never understood that.
Why do you have to assume that I hate your race if I don't prefer to marry within it? It doesn't make sense.
I mean, there are rights of a Muslim. Like, I don't think any of those entail you have to marry them. I mean, it just,
of course not.
And and there are enclaves within the Muslim world. Like, there are Arab neighborhoods in cities in India that have married intramarried other Arabs. And you go to the Arab quarter in these Indian cities, and the food is Arab, the writing's in Arabic. I mean, this is,
everything's Arab about that place, even though it's physically in India.
Yeah. Well, I think what's going on is that for us, I'm talking about converts specifically, when we come to a masjid and take our shahada, we come with all these different issues and everything, and loss of family, ostracization, and wanting to feel like a part of the community. And the mosque, they really don't know how to address these issues. their cookie cutter approach to solve it is, let's find you a Muslim wife or a Muslim husband. Case closed, problem solved, on to the next one. And many times, a lot of people are already dating a Muslim or they're engaged, and then they find out about Islam that way. And at that
that's
point,
a different route.
Yeah. And there's not much at the Muslim community, not to denigrate any of them. I mean, I'm sure, alhamdulillah, they're sincere, and I've met many sincere people who've gone that route. But in that case, the Muslim community, the imam can't really do anything. Yeah, I mean, they just think of this as just a way to integrate someone into a Muslim community, as you just, like, have them join a new family, and then, like, the problem will be solved. And that doesn't normally work out as well as it planned out.
Absolutely not. I know quite a few converts. Without going into too much detail about how I know this, I want to say that 4 out of 5 of convert marriages that I know have ended up in divorce, and it's not. And in all of those cases, it was a marriage between a spouse who was a convert and a spouse who was a Muslim, who was born a Muslim. Right. One of my dear friends actually, it was in that position. He married a Malaysian lady, had kids with her, but he's a convert, she's a born Muslim. You're obviously going to have problems there. They had to split. He's alhamdulillah married now again, but that's just one example. I can think of quite a few more. And at the end of the day, it's not the deen that becomes the issue. In some cases, at least I can think of at least one case where the level of practice is an issue, where the convert is, because he's now cut off from his social support, like where his families, his older friends or whatever. He's now very gung-ho and trying to prove himself. So he's doing all the sunnah stuff, and he's waking up for tahajjud, and he's doing this, that, and the other thing. And the wife's like, meh, I didn't grow up like this, right? And so that becomes an issue. She may be keeping her 5-time prayers and doing her basic fara'id, but like the level of religiosity, when there's too much of a disparity, what do you think is going to happen, right? Not to mention that among converts, if you're specifically, well, not specifically, I've seen this even with Hindu converts to Islam. But even, like, because my data set is mostly white people, it's the idea that it's one is the level of religiosity, but then it's the particular behaviors, as I said earlier, behaviors and attitudes, and the cultural differences that end up becoming a catalyst for bigger fights down the line, and ultimately end up in divorce. So this idea that somehow shoving a new convert, brother or sister, doesn't matter, into an existing Muslim family is going to work out. And clearly it's not working out. Your experience, it hasn't worked out. The converts I know hasn't worked out. So I think it's very unfair. Now we can make husnul dhan of the people, say 20 years ago, who tried doing this, but now anybody trying this now in today's environment, they really don't have an excuse now. And somebody peddling this idea that a convert ought to be expected now to integrate into a Muslim family, the results, right? The results are in front of you.
Yeah.
And if you're going to continue beating the same dead horse, then I would say that you're committing dhulm, you're being oppressive. It's better to suggest to a convert not to get married, get their roots within the deen a lot deeper, get their behaviors and habits and all those things set.
Yeah.
They ought to be learning a lot more, taking classes and that sort of thing. Yeah. Looking to, develop a social circle. That's extremely important. Because the most successful converts that I know um, as successful as in not successful in marriage, but successful in, when it comes to Islam, are those that found other other people to hang around, and and surprise, surprise, that the other people that they're hanging around are other converts.
Mhm.
Like it just doesn't make sense that somebody who already has, a born Muslim who already has social relationships with a lot of other people is somehow going to make room for a convert in their social lives. Ideally, yeah, they should, but we're not talking about what they should be doing. We're talking about what they actually end up doing.
Mhm.
Right? So it makes a lot more sense for now we do have convert communities, so it makes a lot more sense for masjids now to promote this idea that, okay, well, you're a new convert, we know of this community, these 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever number of people, they meet weekly and they do a halaqah or whatever it is. It makes sense for you to join them.
Mhm.
Look how they're adapting to the new religious lifestyle, and pick your cues from them.
Mhm.
It's a bit of an unrelated idea, but in teaching, um, they say that the weaker, academically weaker kids don't actually learn from the academic superstars. They just can't relate. They're not at the same level. They can't relate. Who the weaker students end up learning from are other weak students who've understood something.
Ah.
Right. So that it makes total sense, even in this scenario, that somebody who's a newer convert, but he's had, say, a year or two, maybe 5, under his belt of adopting the practices of the Deen. A brand new convert be sort of, put under his care, so to speak, right? Are you aware of that organization, Paradise Forever? Was it called? Forget
Uh,
the gentleman's name, Robert something. It was, yeah, yeah, and it wasn't you. I think the
Sorry.
organization is
Oh,
defunct now.
we from Toronto.
Yeah.
We're good friends. Robert Heft, P4E.
Robert Heft. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. So I think he used to have like a buddy system for like, but I found that idea of, you know appealing, that, instead of, shoving people into a Muslim family, it makes sense to pair people up, or not pair, but maybe put them together with 5 or 6 other converts who've had a little bit of time in the Deen
Mhm.
thus far, and pick up habits that way. Because at the end of the day, it'll boil down to what kind of daily habits do you have? What how do you operate on a day-to-day basis? That's what you need to
Yeah.
and that's what the hardest thing is, right?
Mhm.
Anybody who's tried to develop a new habit knows how hard it is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure. But I completely agree with you. I mean, it makes perfect sense, and that doesn't mean we're totally cut off from the rest of the Muslim community. I
Absolutely
know.
not. No.
Yeah, I mean, I know. The Muslim community is very happy to see us, and they just keep scratching their heads as to why we don't last. And I think this is a large part of what's been missing. But what's been the when you present this idea, or like this concept, to leadership, or just in general to people in the Pakistani or South Asian Muslim community, like in leadership roles, what's their reaction usually, or have
To
you?
be honest, I just don't interact with leadership. I have
Oh,
a fundamental
good idea.
mistrust of leadership. Anybody in a leadership in a position, I just run the other way. So I don't bother even like making suggestions. But okay, now in the general community, for example, everybody loves to pay lip service. They will pay lip service to the idea. Yeah, great, awesome. But when it actually comes down to doing something, I mean, and it's not, you can't really expect them to do anything, right?
Mhm.
They've got their lives to look after.
Mhm.
Converts
Yes.
have their lives to look after. Just
Yes.
give me a second. My son's making a lot of noise. I'm gonna.
Take as much time as you need. We'll cut it out.
brother and sister.
Nice. Mashallah. Yeah, no, you're right. They shouldn't be expected to. It's just something that's just a lot of these masters is just something completely beyond their scope. And they've admitted this to me, personally. That they, especially like, there's a Darul Uloom that I keep referring to, and all of the, students and the Muslim leadership, they're all wearing shalwar kameez, and the women once every 2 months that you see one is wearing a black niqab, and it's in the middle of an all white town, and really not, they're just not equipped to, it could even be a security issue. I mean, like, even they didn't even want to have an open house because they didn't know who could be walking in. It was a boarding school, so go ahead.
Yeah, that, what do you say to that?
You can't say anything to it. I mean, it is what it is. But again, that's the reality we're faced with. I mean, people want to learn about Islam, they'll go to a mosque, but those who are against it, they just don't want to even go anywhere near it. And I think that's why having like a third space is just absolutely necessary. But yeah, I mean, they, I mean, and then we don't keep, and like you said, what can we do about it? They just end up playing lip service. I mean, it actually gets to the point where we just have to, just get our hands in the dirt and just start doing it, wherever, in whatever community you're in. And like, I'm sure and I'm not, saying this to denigrate the Muslim community at all. I mean, they want to help us out. They really do. They want to see Islam succeed and grow in the West. I just think they don't know what tools to use, and when they do try to help, it ends up, falling flat on its face, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving along, I mean, let's just see here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, there's so many things we could talk about. I mean, the situation in Pakistan, like, you said you were there like recently, like, what you put your finger on the pulse there? What's the situation like, like, vis-a-vis, like, what is the vibe there? Like, what would you say that is, how is the situation with Islam there? Like, the community as a whole, like, what's the vibe there when you go back there?
My sense is always, whenever I go back, now I want to delineate this, separate this from something else. Is there's a lot of poverty there, there's no doubt, but if you can maintain a reasonable bit of class, upper middle class existence there, then for me, at the end of the day, that's what I like.
Okay.
I would prefer to move there, right? Given given finances sorted and also, like, but the thing is, it's not really possible because now my kids they were born here in Calgary and they're Western kids. It'll be an injustice if I were to do that to them, to take them back there, right? But so that's what I feel, and the reason is, I think Pakistan more so than other countries, because as much as the liberal elite in Pakistan want to push their agenda downstream, the level of resistance from the lower rungs of the social ladder, particularly the bearded men, they are very, 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 very resistant. The level of resistance is very high to those ideas, right? We're not at a point yet, like, say, Turkey is an example where within a generation you've seen Islam crumble, right? Now, alhamdulillah, there's been a revival, and a lot of people are now practicing Muslims there, so there's good news there. But what I'm trying to contrast that to is the period of breakdown of the deen by Ataturk and his party, versus the liberal elite in Pakistan pushing their ideas down. Musharraf tried it; he failed miserably. I don't think anybody after that has tried doing something similar. Now, on the flip side, though, you had Ziaul Haq in the 80s, who tried the opposite, and that failed too, right?
Oh.
So, right, he had instituted the Sharia punishments and so forth. There was a lot of problems in how he did it, and there's definitely a case to be made against it, but that failed spectacularly too. My point being that in Pakistan, the idea when they tried a top-down approach, and I think this is true of any place where they try a top-down approach, it just fails spectacularly, right? Like COVID is an excellent example, right? So you have all this, legal superstructure, COVID lockdowns are necessary, and schools ought to be closed, and this, that, the other thing. Literally nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? And which is why, like, you've probably seen me tweet this out once or twice, where I say that Pakistan is actually a lot more libertarian than the United States. And the reason is because on the ground, nobody actually cares what the government says or does, right? I mean, they'll sit in drawing rooms and talk politics, and talk about Nawaz Sharif doing this and Zardari doing that and Imran Khan doing this, that, and the other thing. But when it comes to actual day-to-day life, actual business, actual family relations, nobody actually really cares, right? Which is why culture is a very, very strong glue in that country. Now, it has its negatives, there's no doubt, but the positive there is that it's very, very hard to break the deen out of these people, right? It's super hard. Now that doesn't mean that it's just the deen that's like stuck like glue, right? There's negatives in that there too, like social attitudes towards women, social attitudes towards poor people, for example. Like the disdain that the upper class has for poor people is just, it never made sense to me, right? So things like that. And what I'm trying to say is the culture has two sides to it. Whereas on the one hand, you have the deen very strong there too. On the other, you have the negative social attitudes, they're stuck like glue as well, right? So there's a bit of a double-edged sword. But the good thing is, like, in terms of the liberals being able to push their agenda, they're just not able to do it. They started with this whole Aurat March thing, which literally means women's march, and they tried to do with like a whole bunch of sloganeering and whatnot, but there's still so much resistance to that idea that it's just, I have to be thankful and say, look, subhanallah, like, there's at least one country in the world that hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid on this, the women's march nonsense, things like abortion and free sex and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, you're going to try and impose that in a deeply religious society like Pakistan, you're just not going to have any luck, right? Other countries, I don't know. I like the Levant, for example, has been fairly liberal for a while, so maybe these ideas will find currency there. But far as Pakistan is concerned, yeah, no, I see at least a generation before, they might make a dent in a generation, but they're just disconnected from the elites, or I should say the elites are disconnected from how the general population is.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty impressive that they're able to do that in the face of 2021, where liberalism is just like this train, like this steamrolling train that is just impossible to stop in the West. I mean, yeah, there's some resistance to it, but I wish we had this kind of deeply rooted sense of religion and tradition, that would keep these families together and keep these traditions alive. Instead, I mean, it's just, man, I mean, when I first converted in 2003, like, I look back just like, yeah, like, the conditions were a lot better back then. I mean, the Muslim community, they were super friendly. I made so many great friends. And, even though 9/11 happened, like, and there was still a lot of some negative attitudes towards Islam among non-Muslims, like, still it was, fairly libertarian. I mean, like, yeah, you're Muslim, you pray like a Muslim, like, you will let people let you live your life. But now it's like, it's all in your face. I mean, people have to control basically everything you say and do. And it's just, if you're not completely in line with like the liberal paradigm, like you could lose your job.
Yeah,
And
it's scary.
yeah, I mean,
It's very scary.
I mean, I have to literally watch everything that I tweet now because like I don't want to, like there's this reluctance because, there's some liberal Muslims are coming after our website and are just waiting for us to slip up. I mean,
Yeah, you know what? I don't have a website of my own, but like on Twitter, I just use the block button liberally, very liberally, right? I don't even wait for them to respond to me. I see some random guy tweet something random, go check out his profile. Turns out he's like liberalized himself. Immediate block. I don't want these guys come. It's preemptive. It's very preemptive. I don't do reactive blocking anymore. I do preemptive blocking, and that has saved me a heck of a lot of trouble. Like nobody comes after me now. It's because I've blocked so many people
maybe
preemptively.
maybe that's what I need to implement. But I mean, it's sad because we welcome, we're welcoming people from the other end, Muslims from the other end of the spectrum, to discuss with us and like to debate these ideas and like bring your grievances to the table, and we'll gladly talk about it. I mean, Maheen was talking about the same thing when he did his interview with Spencer a couple of months
Yeah,
ago.
I saw that. Yeah, it's a
And
good one.
like he got like harsh criticism from some people, from many people on the left, but he's like, look, come on, the Madman Lukes, come on, Sultans and Sneakers, and bring your evidence, hatu burhanakum,
Yeah, exactly.
and like we'll have a discussion about it. We'll even be willing to like acquiesce on certain things, and like this is your chance. I mean, this is your chance to bring your grievances to the table, so that people can hear your voice, but they don't want to do that,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I usually say this, that if they're talking with you sitting on on a chair with a table between you two, then at least they're not with sticks and stones trying to beat you down, right? What's better than being at a table talking things through, right?
Yeah, and I think this is the big disconnect, for many born Muslims. Like, they don't have any non-Muslim family members. Like especially if they're living in the West, their threat to them is external. I mean, an Islamophobe to them is someone spray painting graffiti on a mosque at the mosque parking lot, a trespasser, or people spouting stuff on the internet. So to them, I can totally understand why they think, oh, why even bother engaging with these people? They're a threat to me, they're a threat to my family, and let's get them off the mosque property. And why give their ideas and anger towards Islam a platform? So I can totally understand where they're coming from. It's just that for us, we really have no choice. I mean, like our whole family is not Muslim. Alhamdulillah, my family had no problem with me being Muslim, but if you have an Islamophobic family and they're your
Yeah.
dad, your mom's racist, and they say, I want to talk to your imam, like they probably won't. But if they do, on the off chance they do say that, if you have an imam that's like, like we're not even going to talk to these people,
Yeah.
that's really not going to help us out here, I
Well,
think.
and if you remove some of the extremes from their ideas, I mean, at the risk of sounding, like like an alt-righter, I have to say the ideas about immigration make a lot of sense to me. It's the same idea that you apply to convert marriages, is the same idea that I apply. I've heard all my life about Punjabis not marrying Karachi people and Karachi people not marrying Punjabis. You inject a foreign population into a country is going to radically change their culture, right? And somebody who wants to preserve their values, preserve their ideas, behaviors, and attitudes, I can totally see why they're against immigration. And to be honest, I don't have anything against that argument myself. I think it makes perfect sense to me, right? That somebody, what was his name? Peter Hitchens. Peter Hitchens is really. Have you heard of this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, as much as he can come across as an Islamophobe sometimes. I really like the guy, and his ideas make a heck of a lot more sense than some run-of-the-mill Islamophobe, right? A part of the challenge for the Muslim community, the born Muslim community, is going to have to be to acquiesce to certain ideas that do actually have merit. Even a broken clock is going to be right twice a day. So it doesn't really matter if somebody's rabidly Islamophobe if you're not gonna be able to cajole him to sit down and explain to you why he's an Islamophobe. Then you're not gonna have any understanding of where they're coming from. I actually, to be quite honest, I identify more with Islamophobes than I do with the woke liberal brigade, right? Like their values are the same, their cultures are very similar. I mean, other than the theological differences, assuming that such a person might be a Christian, or some of these guys tend to be pagan as well. But other than those differences, they do hold on to family values. They do hold on to, having kids and passing your whatever value set or belief system that they have, pass that on to their kids, unlike the woke liberal brigade among the Muslims, right? So sorry to say, but I actually find Islamophobes a lot better to hang around. I don't hang around them, but if given a chance, I would, because I mean, quite frankly, some of them are really polite. There's an Islamophobe at work. He's a Mennonite, and he's one of the politest person I've met. We've had our Islam's the spawn of the devil kind of debates, but he's a very hardcore practicing Mennonite, very big on family. He's got like 6-7 kids or something like that, and I quite frankly enjoy his hospitality more than I would like to sit down with a liberal Muslim woke person, right? There's no comparison.
Well, yeah, this has been a discussion going on within Muslim circles for quite a bit. I mean, some Muslims argue against mass immigration because it would destroy the deen of the people coming here, because they're not ready for the culture shock involved
Yep.
with moving to the West. My take on it is, and I know I had to address this at some point because it is a controversial issue, especially for us. But I think given the current geopolitical situation, the best thing for Muslims to do is, if they can support a sub-community of what we're talking about, or sub-communities in which they're helping grow an indigenous Muslim community from the ground up based on the convert's culture, that would drastically improve the image of Islam almost overnight, really, because a lot of them have just lost out on their culture, and they feel that it's just dying out because they're not having kids anymore. But if the Muslims can support something like that, that's something where we'd actually have like a bargaining chip. I do not advocate for Muslims, see, the tough thing is, these anti-immigration parties, I can see the argument from the left is that they foment, like a lot of hatred, and a lot of it becomes this echo chamber where it turns into anger towards Islam and Muslims. And that's why, they're afraid that if they come to power, then it's just going to be a free for all, and you're going to see Muslims being abused left and right. And that is a logical fear. And I understand and respect the fact that my Muslim brothers and sisters feel that way. But my suggestion would be, and I know this sounds kind of corny, because neither side really actually has any power right now, either from Muslims side or the nationalist side, would be a treaty in which the Muslims would be following the Sharia in terms of being a good citizen to the non-Muslim country that they're living in, that they're respecting the people, that they're not abusing them. They have a duty to report, and these are all things that a Muslim should follow anyway.
Yeah.
And in return, from the side of the nationalists, they would, refrain from advocating for, involuntary expulsion of Muslims,
Mm-hmm.
allowing for discussion on Muslims and Islam, and advocating for, the most important thing, which is restabilization of the Muslim world, and policies that would help these Muslim countries improve their status. And that way, Muslims who want the Muslim world to improve, who want, management over their own affairs, would be more enticed to either stay or move back. So that's my suggestion for handling this very delicate situation. And like I said, if they once Muslim communities say, okay, let's help these converts form their own get-togethers and communities and marry each other and adapt so they can adapt Islam to their own culture, the stock, it would almost overnight, the stock would go up. I mean, these Islamic so-called think tanks that have all these, like they get paid so much money from the Muslim community and all this government funding to quote unquote stop Islamophobia. And all it's doing is just their policies are just making it 100 times worse. I mean, they're just looking at ways to shut people up. And we all know, growing up as a convert, when you're around people that don't like Muslims, all they're going to do is just go into deeper and deeper echo chambers, and it's just going to make this situation far worse. And they hate to and some Muslims hate to hear that, but it's the truth, because in their eyes, it's already a done deal. They're not Muslims. They don't like us. They're never going to change. They're the out group. We're the in group. And that's why they've been allying with all these groups to, gain support, with groups who may not have anything to do with Islam, but, since they're gaining support, like it's almost like negotiations are off the table, and now we're allying with groups who are ideologically on our side.
Yeah, the enemy of my enemy is my friend deal, right?
Yeah. And the alt-right does likewise. So, even those who are conservatives on the nationalist side, who may have positive or, inquisitive attitudes about Islam, who are willing to talk to others, the more you try to shut them up, the more they're going to, band together, and, their positive attitudes towards Islam are going to go out the window, and they're just going to resort to petty nationalism and anti-Islam sentiment.
Yeah, and I think somehow or the other, this comes up every time I talk to someone about these things. It's exactly what happened to Jordan Peterson, right? It was invited to Riz, and then a whole bunch of woke people made a whole bunch of noise about it, and he was off the list. And what do you think he's going to do after? And now people are complaining he's turned into an Islamophobe. He, hangs out with Ayaan Hirsi Ali or whoever the hell else. Well, what did you expect?
Yeah.
You kicked him out.
Yeah. And the scary thing is, these people are, they're the ones who got the university degrees, the media degrees. They're the most visible in the media. So they're going to be the only voices from the Muslim community that are going to be heard by non-Muslims in any capacity.
Yeah.
And our voices are not being heard because, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why, part of the reason why we're here, I mean, we're trying to, put our ideas forward, because a lot of Muslims think the way we do. I don't know, like, do you interact a lot with people in the Muslim community still there in Calgary, or?
There's a lot of people here. I get to interact with a fair bunch.
Yeah.
Well, not since COVID. COVID's put a damper on things, but other than that, I'm a fairly active social life. So again, the thing is, other than if you're in the professional space, working in an office environment or whatever, Muslim community is actually pretty insular, right? I think a lot of us are, business owners, taxi drivers, that sort of thing. Not to say that, we don't have a big professional demographic, but the sad part though is that the only place where that interaction with non-Muslims occurs is in that professional space, right? Because businesses are geared towards, it's not something insidious. Like if I have a Desi community to offer grocery services to, I am going to offer Desi grocery services to that community. I just can't do it any other way, right? So the opportunities to interact with non-Muslims then are just limited to the professional. So now, that said though, in the professional space, the fact that we have so many, doctors, engineers, lawyers, that sort of thing, is I see that as a positive, right? It's when a non-Muslim interacts with you, he's going to see a person who knows his stuff, who's educated, who's articulate, and that sort of thing. The flip side, though, is that now universities are, bastions of liberal ideas, and absolutely intolerant of anything other than those liberal ideas. So anybody who's university educated now tends to, espouse anti Islam ideas, which, as you said, doesn't help, right? Part of the problem, I think, also is that, I mean, this is of course the case with the alt-right or the Islamophobe folks, but it's also, it's also our problem too, where we're just not willing to look at the other side as other human beings, right? I often say this, that I don't want to say liberal Muslim friends, but because even the conservatives are kind of tarred with the same brush sometimes, because of the Islamophobia issue. But somebody who's anti-Islamophobic on the Muslim side, I'll say, look, these guys have to pay their bills. They have kids that they're sending school to. They have marital problems. They have fights with their boss. Like, they have much more in common with us than you can imagine. And I'm thankful that I work for a smaller company as opposed to a big oil conglomerate or something like Suncor or whatever. I work for a small design engineering company, and that experience has brought me into touch with people who, who aren't as liberal, but they have some of the same problems that we do, right? On the alt-right or Islamophobic or even conservative side, they are seeing their culture eroded, their values being trampled upon, their kids, turning into atheists or liberals or whatever. They have bills to pay, they have medical problems, they have marital issues. Part of the thing that I think we should be doing, born Muslims, is, and we tend to talk about it more than we actually do, is to have empathy. Think of the circumstances, because Milo Yiannopoulos is not a normal person, right? I'm not interested in Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm interested in the average Joe, the guy who works in the cubicle next to mine, right? That's the level of interaction that I'm going to have. And if I'm not going to have even a tiny bit of empathy for that guy, then all communication is going to break down. And I think the part of you're absolutely right that these guys, the woke Muslim left guys, they've hijacked the market that makes the most noise, media, social media, that sort of thing. But I think there's value in personal interaction, day-to-day interaction. Since we're open and since we are in the professional space, we could be doing a lot more by being just, tiny bit more empathetic towards people, who come across as Islamophobic, because not all of these people are Milo Yiannopoulos.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
They're normal human beings. Just treat them like that.
Yeah, no, a few things, and I see this firsthand because a lot of, I know so many non-Muslims, and some of them used to dislike Muslims, but after they, worked with them and interacted with them, their ideas changed 180. Oh, Muhammad is my mechanic and he's an honest guy, and I go to him always change my oil, and I work with this guy, and he's Muslim, and that's trust me, it makes a huge impact. I mean, it's tough for born Muslims to see because they don't interact with these people on a daily basis, or they wouldn't say things they wouldn't normally say to them. But so that's one thing. Another thing is that the percentage of people who are neutral or even positive towards Islam is far greater than, I guess, what a lot of Muslims think. I mean, a lot of people think that, like, I always bring this up. I was talking to, a gentleman who's an imam who runs like the small musalla, who's Palestinian, and like he's saying, I was having dinner, with the Muslim community, and I had a chance to talk with them, and he's like, the non-Muslims, they don't like us here. And I'm just like, well, no, it's not. The percentage is not that. It's not that everyone doesn't like us here. And he said, no, like only very few. And then I'm just like, and thinking in my head, like, look, I grew up in this community. I know, the people here. I know that there's some people out there who don't like Muslims or Islam, but the percentage is not as high as you think it is. I mean, mashallah, the Muslim community, think about it, with all the negative attitude, negative publicity that Islam and Muslims get, for the last, 50 years or so in the media, it's an absolute miracle that not everybody hates Muslims.
Part of the reason why the diaspora Muslim community tends to think of, the West as this one monolithic block that just hates them, right? Is take Canada's example, right? You had the Right Honorable Prime Minister Stephen Harper when he was in power. There was a whole lot of anti-Islamic rhetoric on his party's part, right? And that kind of made it seem like, oh, these white people just hate us, right? Like, so you start allying with liberals, but if you examine why people are actually voting for Harper, wasn't actually because of Islamophobia, right? And that's what a lot of people end up missing, is that not everybody votes for a particular political party out of a sense of xenophobia. Now, xenophobia might be like secondary, maybe not even a consideration. Voting for a political party is it's a trade-off thing. Okay, if I vote for this guy, I'm going to get this but lose this. If I vote for this guy, I'm going to get this but lose this. So what's issue is more important for me, right? So for a lot of Canadians, why should the conservative party's rhetoric about Islam be of any importance to them? It's not affecting them, right? So that's not why they vote. Now that said, the consequences of that for the Muslim community then become interesting, as was shown by Trump coming to power. There were a lot of leftists who voted for Trump because of the way the Democratic Party treated Bernie Sanders, right? It was kind of like a slap in the face for the Democratic Party, right? But again, they had different reasons than that xenophobic. The amount of xenophobic voters, that they're usually, they're the loudest, but they're usually not the biggest demographic that makes a difference in somebody coming to power.
Well, I think another point that's important to point out, even more important than Bernie Sanders, is that, and I think Daniel talked about this with his interview with Roosh. Roosh said he voted for Trump because he said Trump ran on a campaign that said no more wars in the Middle East. And for 4 years, he held to his promise.
Right.
And Hillary, we know her track record with military interventionism in the Muslim world. So, on the one hand, you have Muslims saying, why vote for these warmongering parties? They all hate us. They're all Islamophobes. So then non-Muslims was like, okay, in this election, I'll vote for the person who's not going to have not going to.
It's going to make war upon you.
Not going to have war on you, right? And then you vote for that, and it's like, well, no, don't vote for this guy either. Well, in a two-party system, like you say, you really don't have much of a choice. I mean, personally, I would have voted for Gary Johnson in 2016.
Well, I would have too.
Yeah.
If I was an American. I last election, I gave my vote to the Libertarian Party too here in Canada. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of no wars in the Middle East plus not this Islamophobic Zionist rhetoric. Another issue too is that a lot of all parties, they all have the same, policy toward Israel anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's at this point, it's like moot. I mean,
what party are you going to choose? It doesn't matter if you're looking at it from an Israel-Palestine point of view, then none of these parties actually. Yeah. So. I mean, either don't vote. I mean, that's an option too.
Don't vote. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and again, so again, and not everybody votes too. So I mean, the Muslims look at, like, oh, the Conservative Party won or whatever. Yeah, I wouldn't vote for. I'd cut my hand off for voting for Stephen Harper, but like a lot of Canadians just don't vote at all because they're just like the whole system is stupid. So and and they're not looking at it from a that type of perspective. But like I said, I mean, these are very sensitive topics. I don't normally get into these. I just say that it's an internal discussion within the Muslim community because like I said, there's only so much I can say and get away with. And really, like, I'm just in a totally different situation than, my sisters and brothers who were born into a Muslim family. I care about them. I really do. I mean, I wouldn't care about them had I could have just packed it up and said, you know what? I don't want to be part of the Muslim community anymore. I'm just going to practice on my own in 2016 after, all this stuff happened, but I didn't because I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't want to see this conflict escalate between the Muslim world and the Anglosphere.
Mashallah. I'm totally down for it.
Yeah, but I'm glad you're here to give your side of the story as well, Ahsan. I mean, you're not alone in this. I mean, there's many Muslims who think the way you do. It's just that, like you said, getting our opinions out there is a challenge when we don't have university.
Social media kind of levels the playing field, right? Unless they ban you.
Yeah, unless they ban you. Yeah, I know. I'm waiting for the day, Ahsan.
Yeah, I've gone fairly run of the mill now with my tweets. So
you've noticed though, like the more Islamophobic people on the right tend to keep their accounts on. Like they get deplatformed a lot less frequently than those who are more, like I don't say pro-Islam, but at least willing to talk to us, or anti-liberalism.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
that's the problem.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. So let's see. We're an hour and 22 minutes in. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up? Or
no, unless there's something you want to bring up, I'm open.
What were your thoughts on Moneyball?
It was a fantastic movie. Though I have to say, it's not my favorite movie. My favorite movie will always be The Dark Knight.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I just love that movie. Just love Heath Ledger's performance. It was amazing. As far as Moneyball, I heard a lot about it before I saw it, and I'm just amazed at how long I kind of not saw it. Right, the whole idea of using statistics and going down into the nitty-gritty detail to find the things that really matter, it just is kind of, it connects with me because that's like that's what I do when it comes to like my personal behavior, right? Like I also look at like I read a lot of scientific literature. And so I'm used to looking at like data and statistics and tabulating them in Excel and so forth, and isolating variables and this, that, and the other thing. And so like I never thought that you could, I mean, I'm somewhere in the back of my mind, I must have thought about it. It must have been there. But the fact that it was applied to a sport situation, it was kind of new, even though it's not that, it's not a new idea. It's been there, but like putting in that format, making a story out of it was just fantastic. Like, and then the other part of it was like getting everybody to getting on board with the idea, right? That is like, to me, that wasn't the surprising part. I'm like, yeah, same story happens in every masjid, happens in every company. This is like the human condition. I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah. No, it's very applicable to the mosque environment and changing the culture there, and how incredibly difficult it is. Yeah, and I always refer back to the interview that he had with the Red Sox owner, and he said very clearly, like, anyone who's not tearing down their team right now and rebuilding it using your model, they're dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And he was right. I mean, the Red Sox implemented the same strategy and they won the World Series 2 years later. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, if the statistics are there and it shows this is the direction we should be going in, you would think that they would be on board. But it's threatening the way that they do things. And
yeah, it's amazing how people just don't want to. It's how what's the word? Impervious people are to data. Right? And when I have this problem with like, gender relationships, because that's a lot of my scientific reading is in that sphere, and trying to point out to other people that the different the behavioral differences between females and males are massively statistically significant. It just falls on deaf ears, right? The science is so clear on whether it's mental processes. Of course, there's reproduction is, it's like the biggest thing there is observable. Despite that, people don't want to clue on to the idea that behaviorally, attitudinally, the way the brains work is going to be different between a man and a woman, and so they just stick to this blank slate sort of, men and women are just the same, and it's just the reproductive organs that are different. That it's unbelievable how people don't want to look at the the science on it. They don't want to look at the data on it, right? And the same thing here in the baseball example, because institutions are, as I said, I don't remember whether this was before we started, but I said something about institutions, rather than serving whatever their original purpose was, they start serving the purpose of survival. And that's exactly what it is, because if you tear down the baseball team and build it up according to their principles, all the other guys are just irrelevant now.
mm-hmm.
And they're just not going to have, it doesn't even have to be monetary. It's just that they're going to feel unneeded.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's why people are so resistant to it. It's all up here. It's a subconscious. It's not even they're consciously doing it.
Yeah.
But this is how they behave.
Well, Billy Bean was smart. He didn't fire anybody except for maybe the one guy. But actually, that was made up in the movie. That was exaggerated. But yeah, like he kept everybody. So a lot of, I mean, you have to do this gently, I think, and not go in with a bulldozer when presenting this idea. I mean, we have to make it enticing for everybody. And I think once we start seeing, people convert to Islam en masse, and not just convert, but also stay, then you'll finally start to see the results, and people will say, okay, yeah, this is a much better model. That you have to see the results first before you can actually changes things around. And look at baseball now; everybody uses statistical analysis. There's not a team in Major League Baseball or even in any level that doesn't use statistical analysis.
Yeah.
So
the same thing can apply to a lot of things, right? If you want to look at born Muslim problems, what are they? Atheism among the youth. You could apply this same kind of model, because it's more often than not, vast majority of the time, it's not about the specific theological points. It's usually about alienation, about problems with parents. Social problems tend to be a bit more. Things like my friend gets to date, I don't get to date. That stuff like that, right? It's not the particular theological point that's at issue more often than not. It's other stuff, and trying to do, it would be a tall order of business to do, surveys and collect data and that sort of thing. But I can tell you that the benefit would be immense, assuming that people were willing to listen to what the data has to tell us.
Yeah, I mean, I did my MA at University of Windsor in applied social psychology, so I could very well go back and do my PhD and study all of these things, and get data to corroborate it. But as you said, it's getting people to get on board with the idea, and and that comes into play in so many facets: getting funding, getting your supervisors to agree with it, and then even if I were to do like a PhD, on something to do with Islam for Europeans, like, yeah, it has benefits even from the left-wing perspective. But there's some crazy grad student out there who would probably try to get me kicked off. I'm serious.
Well, I guess that's why you get tenure first, right? And then you do.
Oh yeah, they only take about 20 years. Ow. Yeah, no, I mean, great stuff, Ahsan. I mean, this is really an eye opener, and it's great to, even though we still, I'm sure we had these ideas in our head before. It's just fleshing them out is a great way to talk about them and everything.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I mean, I really encourage you. I mean, like, this is your second interview, with Muslim social media. I mean, like, hopefully this is a good start for you, and like, I'd even encourage you if you want to create your own channel. So if you have,
I have something in mind. It's just I'm like, I just don't get enough time, lots of things going around. So I already have like a mic and I've got my background set up, but
yeah,
I even know what to talk about. It'll be like behaviors, habits, that sort of thing, self-improvement, and that sort of thing. But it's just like, you do need time to record and then edit. I used to have a podcast a few years ago. It was meant to be on historical topics, and my first topic was actually the history of Carthage, the nemesis of the Romans before their empire days, right? It was incredibly tough to do. 40, 50 hours per episode. Each episode was a half hour long. So now I'm kind of very, I'm very like cautious about trying to enter into any social media, content creation before I totally fully understand how much time I'm going to be spending, and try to make sure that it's what I can do.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things are just, you have to make it feasible. I mean,
Yeah.
if you just go on, I mean, it's tough. I mean, when I first started my videos, I mean, they're really just made with a potato iPad. Like, it's just, it's so bad. You go back and I look back, it's like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? SubhanAllah.
Yeah. Well, you started and you got somewhere, right?
Yeah. We're on our way. I mean, like, it's tough trying to come up with content all the time, but I got to start, plugging away at these videos. But thanks for your help, Ahsan. I really appreciate you coming on, and let's keep in touch.
Of course, inshallah. And
inshallah.
thank you for having me too. It was
and
nice to talk about a lot of things.
Yeah, we did. And may Allah give you a blessed Ramadan to you and your family.
I mean, to you as well.
And may Allah forgive our sins and accept the best from our deeds, our fast. I mean. Okay. I'm your host, Rob from Islam for Europeans. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Assalamu alaikum. Have a blessed Ramadan, everybody. Thank you very much and have a great day.